Welcome to Android Authority on Air, the original Android Hangout show on Google+. I'm Derek Ross.
And I'm Dan Charlton.
And I'm Jonathan Franklin.
This week we have all sorts of fun stuff to talk about, mainly why app rollouts suck. And over the past few weeks you've probably experienced that. We're also going to talk about a Google Glass update. We're going to talk about the Samsung Galaxy S4 Active, which was officially announced this past week. And then we're going to have a little bit of State of the Union discussion. We're going to talk about the new Nexus program, the Nexus User Experience program, and how a keyboard being released to the Google Play Store is much more significant than an actual keyboard. It's how Android is evolving and how Android is changing. All right, so let's get started. So I said app rollouts suck, and you know, it's an awesome feature, but we'll get to that in a minute. But ever since I/O, Google has been touting one of the latest and greatest features of the Play Store, and that is to do app rollouts. So if you've gotten the music update, calendar, Hangouts, Gmail, yada yada yada, you've seen all your friends on social networks posting, "Hey, I got the new Gmail," and you go and you check, and I don't have it yet. You check 4 hours later, I don't have it yet. The next day, damn it, I still don't have the update. Where is my update? You know it's available. All your all your friends have it. You're not the cool kid with the update, and you want it. It makes you want it more. It makes you mad that your friends get the new Hangout, the new calendar, the new music, new Gmail, and you don't have it. Where the hell is my update? So, yeah, they're bad. They make you wait, but they do have some good to them, Dan. So why are app rollouts good?
Well, they really do have some benefits for developers. People who are hosting these apps on their own servers, not on Google's servers, can't necessarily take the kind of pressure that tons and tons of people trying to download it all at once for an update or a new app launch. So it gives them the ability to stage that and stagger the load on their servers. But when you're Google, load on your servers really ought not be an issue. And if that's really the reason why they're using these staged rollouts, that's kind of embarrassing because they ought to have better servers than that.
So let's say Dan, so Twitter, for example, which they should have better servers too, but that's the first app that came to mind because they had a recent update. So let's say, I don't think they did staged updates, but let's say Twitter's servers don't get hammered with everyone saying, wow, I want to see what's new, and going and downloading it and testing out the new features. Yeah, I would understand why a smaller company, maybe Twitter wasn't the best example.
No, but for independent developers, it's definitely a benefit. Even for mid-level developing companies, for just app companies, like One Louder Apps, for example. Although I think they're a bad example because they have some other larger parent company. But groups that are just app companies, not platforms like Twitter. But they don't have that kind of massive infrastructure for servers because they don't need massive server farms usually, but they can't necessarily handle that kind of load, so it gives them a way to offload it and stage it over time. But even more than that, it gives you a way to put out your app, have people try it, download it, use it, and maybe come back and say, hey, there's some glitch, something you missed. Because let's be realistic, especially for smaller developers, it's easy to miss things. It's easy to overlook something if you aren't going through some rigorous quality control process. And even if you are, it's easy to miss a typo or some weird bug on some weird device. And so it gives you the ability to call it back, stop the rollout, fix whatever the problem is, and then redo it without having tons of users experiencing whatever that problem is. You only have a very small population.
So it's very developer-centric, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely good for developers. It's not really good for huge companies that ought to be able to take that kind of pressure and those kind of fast rollouts.
I think maybe Google is demonstrating this ability, showing developers that, hey, look, you can do it, and this is how it works. Kind of dog fooding, eating
Sure.
your own dog food, per se.
Sure,
John, you had a comment? John, did you have a comment?
It just if you release something like that, in terms of not just getting it to the users, but affecting your overall reviews on the Play Store, because most of the reviews are, oh, this update broke my whatever, fix it. I mean, you're talking about, because developers really look at their average on the reviews and wonder where they're at. So that's one big thing, is that anything that's released, that's the reason the beta program doesn't affect, reviewers can't post on beta just because of the same reasoning. So.
Okay, and speaking of app beta programs, let's talk about that. That's a new feature that, once again, launched at I/O, and over the past week or two has been becoming more popular. More and more app developers are starting to take advantage of app betas, the beta program. Some of these are Dash Clock Widget, which I love that. I'm sure a lot of you love it if you're on Android 4.2. AOKP Backup has a beta community. Falcon Pro, the very popular Twitter client, has a beta community. Slide Out Messaging has it. And the really popular Nova Launcher has a beta community. I'm sure there's others. These are just ones that I've found, ones that I'm a member of. And you know what? If you found another beta community for another popular app, go ahead and drop it in the comments and let us know, and we'll add it to our list. All right, so why are these beta communities significant? Well, as John was saying, it allows developers to test new features of an app to get some feedback on it. How does it work? Does it work on XYZ device? Do you like this new feature? What do you want to see? But also, it's actually really significant. It actually pushes Google Plus even more. You see, if you're going to use the beta program as a developer, whenever you upload your new app and you say you want to enter into this beta program, you have to select a Google Plus community, meaning that you have to have, it's a requirement to have a Google Plus community for your app. So that's making developers use Google Plus, and it's making app fans, us, the consumers, use Google Plus. And it's not making you be an active user, because the developer is going to say, hey guys, here's my community, and then all the people that are a member of the beta program are going to go to the community, and they're going to talk about things they like, things they don't like, things they want to see. They're going to say, hey, good job, thanks, and they're going to actively engage one another. So the beta program is great for us as Android users, but it's also great for Google Plus as a platform to keep pushing Google Plus and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just so much the dog fooding Google Plus, which I'm sure is a goal of Google's in that front, but it's also a value added for developers, right? Like, they're giving developers a free place, free hosted place to channel all of their comments, all of their questions, all of their development, all of their foruming, all of their everything into this free community that we're going to host for you, no charge. Here you go, right? If app developers and ROM developers start taking advantage of that same sort of platform, that's going to be the end of some major Android communities like XDA and RootsWiki and even the Android Central forums, right? If Google pushes this hard enough and right and to the right people, they could really take over the Android forum market too.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that happening in some regard. I know, like Paranoid Android, their official forums, is just pretty much their Google Plus community.
Exactly.
CyanogenMod has a massive Google Plus community. Now they also have their forums too. AOKP has massive forum here. So I could see that happening a little bit. But back to betas, yeah, it's very neat. It requires Google Plus, use of Google Plus, and I like it. So once again, if you found any other ones besides the ones I mentioned, Dash Clock Widget, AOKP Backup, Falcon Pro, Slide Out Messaging, Nova Launcher, go ahead and let us know in the comments, and we'll go ahead and check them out, because betas are fun. I like betas.
Definitely, everybody loves betas. But how about some devices that have been launched? Actual.
Okay, so let's talk about the Galaxy S4 Active. So it was officially announced this week, and it came with an IP67 rating. So what exactly does IP67 mean? Well, it's actually two ratings, two numbers. The 6 means it has complete dust resistance. So that means dust isn't going to get inside it. That's good. All phones should be resistant to dust. You would want that, I would assume. The 7 is something more than the average phone has. The 7 means it protects from between 15 centimeters and 1 meter for 30 minutes in water. So that means your device can be up to a meter in water for up to 30 minutes, and you can take it out and use it, and it'll be fine. So it's not, waterproof, it's water resistant. So dust resistant and water resistant, that's what 67 means. So a lot of people are calling it a rugged device. Yeah, I mean, they call it Galaxy S4 Active because that's what it is. It's not a rugged device. A rugged device, would be a device that you dropped and it didn't go splat. A rugged device would have a harder shell. It would have maybe something more to protect the screen. I mean, it already comes with Gorilla Glass 3. Maybe it would have some type of screen protector, or I don't know. Either way, it should be more robust than just dust and then water, than plastic. Yeah. So besides the IP67 rating, what's different? Well, it actually looks a little different, and some of the specs are slightly different. It's a little heavier and a little thicker. Maybe that's because of the water resistance. Maybe that's because
they got to add some padding in there to protect everything.
Yeah, maybe
plus the dust resistance.
The dust resistance, yeah. So it also has an 8-megapixel camera. The regular Galaxy S4 has a 13-megapixel camera, and the neat thing about the camera is it's rated to take photos underwater. So that's why it's an 8-megapixel camera. The screen's actually different technology too. The regular version uses the Super AMOLED screen that we've all come to know and love from Samsung devices, and the active version uses a TFT LCD. And some people have speculated, why they use a different screen. Well, an LCD is better in direct sunlight, and since it is an active phone, it's an outdoorsy phone, you're going to be using it more outdoors. I don't know. That's why I'm thinking, Dan, John, any other reason why they may have changed the screen?
I can't think of any other good reason why they would not go with their in-house technology.
Maybe money. I mean, LCD screens are cheaper for them to produce. They do have their own LCD division too. So
that's true. Yeah, it is a little bit cheaper to build the LCDs than it is their AMOLEDs. But yeah, it's probably mostly the light though, because AMOLEDs traditionally don't do particularly well in direct sunlight. On the other hand, they're typically a lot more battery efficient than LCDs.
So let's talk about active devices, rugged devices, more resistant devices real quick. So Galaxy S4 came out roughly 2 months ago or so, depending on your carrier. A month ago, or a few weeks ago. If you're Verizon, yeah. So you bought your device, you love it, you realize, I would have liked my phone to be waterproof or water resistant and dust resistant. Here comes the active version, and you're past your 15-day or 30-day return period. You're kind of screwed. You have to buy a new device. So why aren't manufacturers putting out devices with this rating from the get-go, or at least releasing the two at the get-go, the same at the get-go? Some of them are. The Sony Xperia Z has an IP67 rating, and they didn't have to release a rugged version or an active version. It's that version. So some manufacturers do this, some don't.
One thing to note with the Z is that it's not really ruggedized either on the outside. I mean, it's a glass outside, but one of the biggest usage cases, from what they say from people in Japan, are they use their phones so much that especially women wanted to actually take their phone in the shower with them, which was one of their motivating factors between making a phone that was more waterproof, not just the rugged side, but making sure that it was waterproof or water resistant, was because of so many people in Asia, with that usage case, that they wanted to take their phones in the shower with them. So
John, so the advertisement that Deutsche Telekom did, T-Mobile did in Romania, was that they had a woman in a shower in a mall talking on her phone and playing with her phone. So it wasn't just a sex sells thing; it was an actual legitimate. People actually want to use their phone in the shower.
Apparently, this is an actual usage case scenario.
In the mall, yeah.
Dude, who showers at the mall?
Well,
must be a Romanian thing.
Apparently you do that. All right, so another device here. Glass. Yeah, I still haven't gotten my purchase link yet, but that's a sad face.
Still crying about it.
And I'm still crying about it. We won't talk about it anymore. Fingers crossed, confidence high for next week. So if you are rocking Glass right now, even if you're not, it's a neat update. XE, which stands for Explorer Edition, XE6 over-the-air update came out this past week, and it's a major camera software update. Whenever you take a picture with the new camera software, it takes 3 photos sequentially, similar to how HDR works. It takes one with low exposure, average, medium exposure, and then high exposure. So similar to HDR, and that's actually what it is. It alleviates the overexposure when there's a lot of light, or the underexposure, when there isn't a lot of light. And Google says it allows you to not be afraid of the dark, because apparently with Glass previously on the XE5 software revision, if you took a picture and it was kind of dark, it's very, very hard to see the person or the object you took a picture of. And similarly, if you were outside and it was a sunny day and you took a picture of a scenic mountain or something and you had some sunlight in there, it was very overexposed up where the sun was, and it just wasn't as good as it could be. So they fixed this, and you should check out some of the photos. They're gorgeous. I mean, they're in low light, they look normal, and where the light is great, where light is very good, you actually get an HDR effect, and so it's pretty awesome. Besides better pictures, the XE5 or XE6 update gave voice dictation to your photos and your videos for captioning. So you take a picture, you want to say, hey, this is a picture of my buddy Dan Charlton. I don't have to type that in later. I can go ahead and voice dictate my caption before I upload it and share it. So that's cool. So besides Glass, I think we had some Samsung tabs thanks to Computex over in Asia, right, John?
Yeah, they announced them this week, and if you want some good news, if you have a Note 10.1 or a Galaxy Tab 2, you're not going to be jealous at all seeing these tablets coming out, because it's almost exactly the same as the last one and the one before that. They'll launch both of them as an 8.1 and a 10.1. Both of them will be launching with Android 4.2. The 8-inch is, yeah, slightly. 8-inch is going to have a 1.5 gigahertz. It's an unknown. They didn't announce what type of dual core. We're assuming an ARM dual core with a 1.5 gigabytes of RAM. The 10-inch is going to be a 1.6 gigahertz dual core with hyper-threading Intel. It's an Atom Z2560 Clover Trail, and it has 1 gigabyte of RAM. The 8-inch is going to get a 5 megapixel camera with no flash and a 1.3 front. 10-inch is going to get a 3 megapixel camera, also with no flash, and a 1.3 front camera. Intel is going to be supplying the 3G and 4G radios for this as the XMM6262 for GSM. So if you're on T-Mobile, you might have a chance to do this. And that's for HSPA plus 21 only. And the LTE radio is straight up LTE. It's not going to have any CDMA support whatsoever. 8-inch.
No Verizon or Sprint.
Yeah, no Verizon, no Sprint, no or any international carrier such as in Europe that has CDMA. 8-inch, 1280 by 800 TFT LCD display, which is about 189 pixels per inch, so maybe about on par with a Nexus 7 in pixel density, almost. The 10-inch also has a 1280 by 800 TFT LCD display, which is the exact same as the last Galaxy Tab and the one before that, and it comes in at 149 pixels per inch. But if you really want a reference, Samsung makes the displays for both the iPad 3 and 4 and the Nexus 10, in which the Nexus 10 is still the highest resolution tablet display at 2560 by 1600. So it effectively has double the pixel density at 300 pixels per inch. And Samsung makes this display. So, I mean, to me, it just seems like Samsung doesn't take their tablet seriously at all, because they produce better components for, their partnership with Google, but also for Apple. And it's almost like they throw, to me, it just seems like a disappointment because they're putting out so much effort in phones and they're putting nothing in tablets. And in a lot of ways, Android tablets, even though they have the market share, it feels almost like Android was when it was on Gingerbread, where the market share was there, but it just wasn't quite there yet.
Yeah.
Because the OEMs just weren't putting the effort into it. And that's kind of what the Android tablet market kind of feels like to me right now, because the OEMs just aren't getting behind it.
On the other hand, you can get a Nexus 7.
Yeah, or you can get a Nexus 7. But, it's just sad to see the OEMs put so little effort into trying to come out with something groundbreaking on the tablet front.
No, I agree. I think Asus is probably one of the better tablet manufacturers right now, if not the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of Samsung, they've been having some issues with their Exynos processors lately. There's rumors coming out of various sources that they're having some pretty significant supply issues getting the Exynos chips together, which is probably why the S4 Active, in addition to being different in a couple of other ways, or excuse me, not the S4 Active, the S4 Mini is coming with a Snapdragon 400. The Note 3 is rumored to have a Snapdragon 800. The Galaxy Tab 10.1 has an Intel processor. None of these are Samsung processors, and they make processors. So there's a lot of indications that things are not looking good for the Exynos platforms. They're facing supply problems. They're facing yield problems as well. They've been struggling to make 28-nanometer chips, at least to make them as efficiently as they were able to make 32-nanometer chips. And there's also a lot of indications that they've got some hardware problems with the Exynos 5 Octa, with the 8-core chip in the international S4, in about 30% of the S4s sold around the world. So it's not a very popular chip, even from Samsung. But this is really not good for Samsung in terms of their processor development. The last year's chip, the Exynos 4 Quad, was not particularly impressive in terms of innovation. I mean, it spec'd well, it performed very well. The Exynos 5 Octa still performs very well, and I'm certainly not trying to fault Samsung their performance dues. They definitely do perform well, but the Octa is not nearly as power efficient as ARM's big little architecture is supposed to be. And I mean, this is a hardware problem in the chip. It's not something that they can solve with just a new kernel. This is something where the hardware is physically not working. The only way to fix it is to remanufacture the chips, which obviously they can't do for units they're already producing and selling, but they don't have enough time to retool their entire production line in order to meet the deadlines for the Note 3 or the Galaxy Tab 10.1 or any of their other upcoming devices. So this is a big problem, and Samsung licenses their architecture from ARM, and so there's a lot of indication that some of these problems might be in the underlying architecture and not just with Samsung. So this poses a pretty big ongoing problem for Samsung, where Qualcomm is just eating up the marketplace right now, and they've got nothing to compete with them right now. Meanwhile, Qualcomm does not license their architecture from ARM. They design their own, and so they continue to iterate on the Crate architecture, make it better, refine it, improve it, and they can do so more or less at will, whereas Samsung is very hamstrung by what ARM does and on the timetable that ARM doesn't.
This is one thing Apple does, too,
exactly.
On Samsung's own process.
Yep, Apple has, with the A6 processor, moved in the same space Qualcomm is, and they're designing their own and not relying on Samsung to build them. Samsung's still building them, they just aren't designing them anymore. So, yeah, it definitely gives the designers a lot more flexibility in terms of moving more rapidly than ARM's architectural designs. But even still, Samsung could do a lot to innovate within the architectural constraints. NVIDIA, with their 4+1 setup, is legitimately trying new things, not just taking ARM's designs, printing them, and then selling them. So there's definitely room for them to get better. It's just a question of whether or not they can get it together and do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a question here from, let me find it here. All right, we have a question from Jabrari Whitfield. He says, "Why do you think, or what do you guys think about glass being banned in public places?" Personally, he thinks it's silly, and how will these bans, be affect in the future when we move forward? Well, I think it's silly too, because, let's use casinos as an example, because it's a public place per se. Glass is banned in casinos, or will be banned in casinos. Well, you know what? Cameras are also banned in casinos. You're not allowed to take pictures in casinos. Go to a casino and whip out your camera phone and start taking pictures. You're going to get in trouble. You're not allowed to do that. The same goes for, let's see, what strip clubs made headlines. You know what? You can't go to a strip club, I've heard, and take pictures. These are things you can't do with regular camera phones and regular cameras. And last comment I'll make is, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever camera phones were starting to pop up everywhere, many places around the world banned them. Public places banned them. Municipalities tried to ban them. Courts banned them. They were banned in, everywhere. Even the city of Chicago tried to ban them. Yeah, an entire city. Chicago wasn't alone. Many places tried to ban camera phones. And to this day, some places still do have camera phones banned. Some places of work where you show up and they have a bin or a little locker and say, hand it over. So it's going to happen with glass, not because it's glass, not because it's a head-mounted camera, because some places do not allow cameras. And, it's just how it is.
Yeah. And another one is, right now, that's a big usage case of glass because the category really hasn't been defined yet. It's good for navigation. It's good for, but the biggest case is people using glass to take pictures and videos of their kids and stuff like that. So until the third-party ecosystem kind of catches up with glass and they define what the category is going to do, that's going to be the big focus of glass right now, is that, the camera is probably the most obviously used part about it.
So, in case you didn't know, at the Google, was it the shareholder meeting? Is that what it was that happened? Glass was banned, and that made headlines. Google bans glass from their own shareholder meeting. Well, camera phones, cameras, they were banned too. Media, stop. You're trying to, you're bait and switch. You're trying to link bait. You're trying to draw clicks. You're trying to say things that aren't really what they are. Glass was banned, but you know what? Cameras were also banned too. Anything that had a camera attached to it was banned. They didn't just say, nope, no glass, we don't trust our own product. No, they said anything that has a camera, it can't be here. So it's not just glass. Stop, people. I really think sometimes people just fish for things, just because. Why not? They like controversy, and it draws attention to your site.
Isn't that what he wants?
Moving on to things that don't make me upset. Okay, so let's talk about the state of the union. Let's talk about State of Android's Nexus program. So the past couple weeks have been interesting. We've had Nexus user experience devices officially announced, and then speculated to be announced. First, we had the Samsung Galaxy S4, which will be available in the Play Store here in a few weeks on the 26th for $600, and it'll be stock Android. Similarly, the HTC One will be available in the Play Store for a little bit cheaper, $550, and it'll come with stock.
$600.
Yeah, I think it's $550.
$600 and $650.
What did I say? $600 the first time? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you're right.
$550 and $600. It's
yeah,
$600.
yeah. So I had the $50 right, but yeah. Okay. So Derek was wrong. It's $650 for the SGS4, and the One is just $600. My bad. So now there's reports. It's unconfirmed at this time, but now there's reports coming out that there will be a Sony Xperia Z Nexus Experience Edition, which is great because that will be a third Nexus edition, And the Xperia Z is the only one of those three that has a company-supported AOSP project. So, Sony's very developer-friendly. They actually have a whole entire program, and they've uploaded source code to GitHub where you can actually download and run AOSP on your current Xperia Z, and they've had it for other Sony devices in the past. So it makes sense for Sony to do this.
For all intents and purposes, the fact that they do that makes the current Xperia Z a Nexus Experience device. This is just a matter of slapping some branding on it, doing exactly what they're already doing, and letting Google sell some more.
Well, that's probably they probably just turned around and did it really quick.
Yeah, exactly.
They had the resources right there.
This Nexus Experience thing where you just have to build AOSP for your device and release it. Oh, wait, you mean this thing we're already doing? Sweet.
Yeah, but also, Dan, it's for people that don't know how to do it or don't want to do it.
No, exactly. Yeah. I get the why the consumers want that, but for Sony, it's a no-brainer. They're already doing everything.
So Sony's able to do this, and it sounds like it can actually, it's something that we said, they're already doing. So chances are this rumor is most likely going to happen, and so that makes 3 Nexus Experience devices, and then we have a 4th Nexus Experience device because it's the real Nexus device, the Nexus 4. So that makes 4, and now we have a 5th device that has been officially announced in recent times, the Moto X. While it hasn't been called a Nexus Experience device yet, it hasn't received that branding or that marketing term, but we do know for a fact that Motorola had said that they are going to only put out phones running stock Android. So for all intents and purposes, Motorola said they were going to do it. It's a Nexus Experience device. Whether they're going to officially brand it that way or not, we don't know yet. We also don't know if it's going to be available on the Play Store. I highly doubt every carrier version will be available in the Play Store, but that doesn't mean they're going to put a version on the Play Store that will work on AT&T and T-Mobile, such as the other devices that are going to get slapped up there. So there is a definite possibility that we're going to have 5 Nexus devices, Nexus Experience devices, stock Android devices on the Play Store. And if this sounds familiar, remember last summer when there was all sorts of rumors about 5 devices being launched with 5 phones. We're going to have an Xperia Nexus, Galaxy S Nexus, and a Razer Nexus, and all this other stuff. And then the rumors were eventually debunked. But it's kind of funny that you fast forward less than a year later, and this is actually happening. We're actually going to have 5 Nexus devices, or 5 Nexus Experience devices, and they're all from the major manufacturers, and they're all going to be built, except for LG, but they're all going to be built using devices that already exist, built in that manufacturer's style. Each device is styled to their own manufacturer, and that's really what a lot of Android fans, chances are, if you're watching or listening to this, that's what you've wanted, for years. You've wanted a device of your choice that you like, and you've wanted stock Android. That people have wanted that forever. Android enthusiasts have wanted that forever. So Android is really changing, and what I want to know before we move on is, so out of these 5 devices, we have the Nexus 4, the official Nexus by LG. Then we have the Galaxy S4 Nexus, which I don't really want to call it that, but for argument's sake we will. And the HTC One Nexus, and then the Sony Xperia Z, Nexus, and then the Moto X, which is basically a Nexus. So out of all these Nexus Experience devices, which ones would you guys choose? Let me know in the comments which ones, if they were all available right now on your carrier, which one would you choose? And while you guys are letting me know, Dan and John, same question. Dan, go first. If you had a choice of those 5, which one would you choose and why?
Assuming somebody else is paying for them, I would definitely choose the HTC One. I think it's an extremely well-made device. It's definitely top of the line, and I mean, at this point, we're not even worried about the software on the devices. It's just about the device. How does it feel in your hand? How does it look? How much do you like the physical aspects of the device? And I've looked at all 3 of these devices and held them in my hand, and I definitely am most impressed with the HTC. I have an Nexus 4. It's not that I don't like it. It's just that the HTC is nicer.
Okay, John, how about you? Which device would you rock if money wasn't an option? It was on your carrier.
I would definitely be curious to see what Motorola has to bring to the table this year. But I've always liked Motorola. I kind of have a soft spot for them, but it just really depends on the hardware they can get into the device. But if it was down to the Z or the 1 or the S4, I'd have to lean to the 1 too, because the Z is a really nice phone. The display is kind of not quite as good as the other two, and I feel like they're a little bit behind on hardware, and I just prefer the 1 over the S4 personally.
Okay, well,
So I would say Motorola or HTC in an even tie.
I will say that it's tough to pick the Moto X because we don't know the specs and we don't know anything about it really. But I'm very hopeful on a few tidbits of information we do know, and just because Motorola, we know they make quality devices. And I don't really think Google's first, major initiative through Motorola is going to, I would assume it wouldn't be junk. So I'm going to say the Motorola X, the Moto X. However, since that device is not available right now and we don't really know much about it, I would say the Xperia Z Nexus experience, because I got to play with that device at CES, and it's a gorgeous device. It's thin, it's well built, it feels really solid. Sure, it's a little older hardware at this point, but it's still a beautiful device. And I can get it dusty. I can hold it underwater for up to 30 minutes. Take a shower with it, as we talked about earlier. I think it's a gorgeous device. I would pick the Xperia Z if the Moto X didn't excite me. So
none of them were a bad choice at all. I mean, you can't go wrong with any of them.
No, definitely.
So here's an interesting thought I had the other day. So now we have these 5, Nexus devices, and we know that Google a lot of times is criticized for various things with Android. How they can't keep a device up to date, fragmentation, yada yada yada. And a lot of people thought Motorola was going to be the savior, Google was going to be in control, all this crazy stuff, right? So let's say that some of these people are right, and that's part of the reason why Motorola was acquired. We know that that's not entirely the whole reason. But anyways, do you guys think that the whole reason we're seeing multiple devices running a Nexus experience, and this new Nexus experience program, do you think Google started it just so they could sell their own Motorola X, their own Motorola phones, through the Play Store? Because that would be favoritism, right, if they only sold their own device. So do you think that they're doing this just so they can sell their own, or do you think this is something that's been planned for a while? Or
no, I don't think it has anything to do with selling devices through the Play Store. I don't think that's a big enough sales channel for them to be that concerned about it. Motorola knows how to sell devices. They sell them through Verizon. They sell them through carriers. They do very well at it. Well, not very well at it, but they do well enough at it. Right? They know a lot more about selling devices than Google does, obviously. As anybody who's watched any other Google Play Store release of late, it's been a disaster. So I really don't think that their concern is that much about, ooh, we need to get it into Google Play. I think if you look back at last fall when we were hearing all of these rumors about all of these Nexus devices from multiple manufacturers, I think that this move from Google has been in the works for a while, and it's been a matter of getting the right devices, getting the manufacturers on board, getting the ducks in a row, and all the I's dotted and T's crossed, etc., and the licensing, blah 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 blah, working with all of the companies. So I think this is something that they've been pushing for a while, where the Nexus program can more or less become a licensing program. You meet these terms, you build an AOSP, version of Android for your device, you release the source code publicly, you put it out, we're happy to sell it for you through the Play Store, or you can sell it yourself, or don't even bother selling the device, just put out the AOSP software and we'll call it a Nexus Experience eligible device. So I think if OEMs are willing to meet those terms, then we're going to start seeing a lot more of these.
I think it's a play to get OEMs back into the kind of get the community back, because the community in the last couple of years has kind of stagnated on development because they've had to work around so many things that HTC and Samsung and done, have really tied into their own software stack and something that should be done on a kernel level, or more of a less tied into their own and dependent on their software stack. So if you really kind of get the community back excited about Android again, then as far as their end, on Google's end, it can get people contributing to stuff that actually matters, not stuff like trying to get GPS and Bluetooth going on a device because you have nothing to go off of, for months, and fighting stuff like that when they can be contributing to something useful. And
Exactly.
it's kind of slowed down the AOSP side of Android because, aside from the Nexus devices, which really aren't big sellers, it gives some kind of incentive for the OEMs to give you a reference point. So I think that's going to be, it's not so much how many sales they can get, but if the OEMs do decide, even if it's just to sell a small handful of devices, it's going to absolutely supercharge the communities because they can start customizing and doing things that matter. And really everything that has been merged into Android over the last couple of years, in the ice cream sandwich and stuff, is stuff that kind of was in custom ROMs before that Google merged into Android later and made it better.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we actually had a question from actually the same guy as before, Jabrari Whitfield. He asked about Google Wallet and NFC. We've covered that before, and it's a downhill argument. So we're going to ignore that right now. And what we are going to do is we're going to talk about also. He asked, what do you think about Google moving core Android apps to the Play Store, newest being the keyboard? Will this allow Google to take some control back from, and then it got cut off? I'm assuming control back from carriers, control back from OEMs, and so forth. So that actually is the next part of the State of the Union talk. So leading into that, thank you for that question. So hopefully this answers your question for you. So a keyboard was recently released, the Google keyboard, and it's a keyboard. Not too exciting, right? I mean, a lot of us already have it anyways, either on a Nexus device or on a custom ROM, or it's a keyboard. So why is a keyboard so significant? Well, it shows that another core Android app, another app that only was available on a Nexus device or through AOSP, is now available to anybody and everybody through the Play Store. And this has been happening for a while now. It's been happening for years. Initially Gmail only was available on Android. And you couldn't go. I mean, that's really not the right way to say that, I guess. It was only available on a Google licensed device. You couldn't go out there and download it on the Play Store unless you already had it installed.
It's still only available on a Google licensed device because it's only available on the Google Play Store, which is only on a Google licensed device. The point is that you can now download it and get updates for it through the Play Store. It used to be that you could only get your update to Gmail when the new version of Android rolled out to your device in 6, 8, 12, 18, 25 months.
Yeah, exactly. So you had to wait for a new version. So Maps used to be the same way. Maps used to be bundled, with Android. Voice search, Google Talk, now known as Hangouts, YouTube, Sound Search, and Calendar. So all of these apps used to be bundled with Android, where you would have to wait, as Dan was saying, until your carrier or your OEM put out a new version for you to get the new version. And Google, let's say they're putting out new operating systems once a year, twice a year. So that's only once or twice a year for that app to get updated. And as well as I do, these apps now get updated more than once a year or twice a year. So that's really, really awesome that they're breaking these core apps out of Android, allowing them to get updated more often, but more importantly, updated without carriers and without OEMs say. And we saw evidence of this at I/O as well, how Google demonstrated that they can take control of Android without you, without carriers, muddying the waters, or OEMs, that it's still their OS, and that's what they demonstrated. We'll get to that in a second. So there's still a handful of apps that aren't available on the Play Store that come, baked into Android that you have to wait for an update, or some of them actually aren't even available on all devices. They're Google proprietary, such as Face Unlock or the Mail client where you can do ActiveSync to connect to an Exchange server. That's Google licensed. It's Google proprietary. That's why every different OEM has their own implementation of it. So I don't know if, due to licensing, I don't know if those will ever get added. Most likely not. But people, the Contacts app, people could get added. I mean, right now seems like every OEM has their own version of Contacts. It's not just simple people. I hate HTC, by the way. So
Samsung's is worse.
Yeah, Samsung's is worse. So and also the stock camera, stock gallery app, the stock messaging app, the stock dialer. There's a lot of stock clock. There's a lot of apps that still could get the Play Store treatment to where they can get updated as often as need be without having to wait a year for a new version of Android, or never getting a new version of Android, even worse. So, go ahead. Do you want to say something, John?
Dan had a comment too.
Oh, Dan? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Google's really doing one of the things that I've been saying CyanogenMod should be doing, where CyanogenMod hasn't been able to release versions of their operating system very quickly, or at least not as quickly as they used to be able to, because they're putting so much time and effort into all of the customized apps they're doing now. What Google's doing is abstracting the app development away from the platform development. The two ought not depend on each other. And so they're separating them from each other in development and in delivery and in every way really that there is, and that's really the way that it ought to be managed. Each of these applications should be an independent project, an independent silo that doesn't necessarily depend on all of these other pieces just in order to get an update. Right? I mean, this is why CyanogenMod's release candidate for 10.1 came, 8 months after 4.2?
Yeah, so Google's taking more control of Android by breaking out the apps that we know and love and updating them separately, and that's a good thing. So that's a very different version of Android than what existed 2 years ago, even a year ago. In the past year we've had Talk, we've had Calendar, we've had Keyboard, Sound Search. Those have all been added just from the past year. Before that, a while ago, it was Music and Gmail and Maps and YouTube. Anyway, so moving on.
One thing worth noting, because a lot of people ask, why are my updates so slow? Why did the carriers have to have so much of a involvement, and why does Apple do so good? Just clarifying, what Apple does is they get their software ready and get the carrier approval invisibly to the user, as in they get this stuff done ahead of time. But if it's never going to be solved by an OEM adopting stock Android ever, because the Verizon Galaxy Nexus and original Droid can prove that to you, as well as the Sprint Galaxy Nexus. But the real answer to that question is, if you want that from an OEM, is the topic of support. Is what Apple, when you call a carrier for service for your iPhone or whatever, then they're going to direct you to Apple, because that was part of the agreement. Apple has to provide the support for the device. So that's the reason they can send software updates through iTunes, is because they're the ones that bear the responsibility of handling any issues that come from it. So if you want a device from Samsung or HTC, Google, Motorola, whomever, they'll have to actually create some kind of channel to offer support and guarantee their software to you and offload that burden off of the carrier. That's the only way you're actually going to get carriers out of the way, is they're going to have to make those negotiations. So this is why Google has to do this, because nobody has done this.
Nope, absolutely. Absolutely. The support is not a small issue. But people don't realize the reason that Verizon is able to justify locking everything down is because they need to guarantee that they can provide a high-quality blah, 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 blah. You don't care because you just want to root your device. The problem is Verizon is responsible for providing all of that blah, 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 not HTC, not Samsung, not LG, not whoever made your device, right? If you have a laptop that has a Verizon LTE chip embedded in it and something goes wrong with it, you call Dell or HP or Lenovo or whoever made your laptop. You don't call Verizon.
Yeah.
But if something happens to your Samsung Galaxy S4 on Verizon, you call Verizon, not Samsung.
All right. So back on topic here. Play Store has core Android apps, and that's awesome. So how else is Android evolving, and how else is Android changing? Well, we actually talked about it a few weeks ago on our show recapping Google I/O. We talked about Google Play services, where Google demonstrated that they could update Android basically without you knowing and without actually putting out a new version number. And just a real quick recap, the Google Play services, the new version brought games, which achievements, leaderboards, multiplayer, location-based API updates and new API uses, such as the Fuse location provider, geofencing, and activity recognition, which right now I don't know if there's a whole lot of apps that actually take advantage of these. I did see one that was taking advantage of fencing recently, but I don't remember the name. And last location, or I'm sorry, after location APIs, Google Cloud messaging was also demonstrated, and cross-platform single sign-on. So these are things that come to Android without you having to get, Android 4.3, which we don't know when it's coming out yet. Who knows when it's coming out? It doesn't really matter. Your Android's updated with new apps and with new APIs. You didn't have to do anything. You have to install a new app. Your carrier didn't have to do anything, and your manufacturer didn't have to do anything. And that's cool. That shows a lot. It shows how the platform is evolving.
Yeah, not just evolving, but maturing, right? Like, when you look at desktop operating systems, particularly the mainstream ones that people really know about, Windows and OS X, you get a version of Windows once every, 3 to 5 years? Apple releases a little bit quicker, but not that much quicker. And so people are used to having a stable platform for the long term, not this every 6 months there's a new whole version of the operating system. So I think this is definitely a good direction for Android. Last and not least for the evening, we're going to cover some patent news. And there's actually been some pretty exciting news in patents this week. Samsung won an import ban from the ITC against Apple products. While that sounds very exciting, it's only for the Apple iPhone 4 and below and the iPad 2. I don't think the one ever had cellular connectivity.
I think 4 only applies.
And it was also banned then. So these are devices that, I think with the exception of the iPhone 4, aren't even sold in the United States anymore. But if they were, Apple would no longer be allowed to import them.
And a win is still a win,
Yes.
Because Apple's had some very, lowly wins as well. So it's nice to say you're winning something, right?
Definitely. For people who are wondering, the thing that those devices have in common and why not the newer devices, the iPhone 4S and newer and the iPad 3 and newer all are using Qualcomm radio technology. Strangely, I thought that the 4 and below were using Intel tech and not Samsung, but I don't know how they pulled that one off, but go Samsung. The other big news in patents this week was the White House putting out a whole bunch of proposals and executive orders regarding patent litigation and the whole patent troll issue. Probably one of the biggest aspects of this is the president coming right out and calling patent trolls patent trolls. No mincing words, no beating around the bush, no patent asserting entities or any other fancy, colorful bullshit to say patent trolls. They're despicable, they're horrible, they're trolls. They're bad for the economy, they're bad for innovation, they're bad for everybody. And so definitely good for the president in not mincing words on that one. After that, he followed that up with a lot of proposed legislation, which, if anybody really follows politics, I'm sure you'll agree there's little hope any legislation will get through Congress, no matter how good it might be. But those suggestions are really pushing for a lot more patent reviews by a program called the CDM, as well as increasing end-user protections. And when I say end-user protections, I mean, for example, a restaurant buys a Wi-Fi router and provides Wi-Fi to its customers, and some obscure patent troll sues them because they have some patent on something that's drawn up so vaguely that it covers anything that uses Wi-Fi. So end users are people that aren't in any way involved in technology and are still being forced to defend themselves in these litigations. The other big proposal was fee shifting. Fee shifting is basically forcing patent trolls to pay the legal fees of the other party when the other party wins. Ironically, the leading judge, the chief judge for the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit, which, by the way, created software patents in the first place, penned an op-ed where he was basically talking about fee shifting and how important it is and how really this doesn't need new legislation because there's a provision under current law that could be enforced, that ought to be enforced, that would allow fee shifting to occur already. So I guess we have to ignore the irony of the fact that this man sits on the main court for patents in this country and has never tried to apply this fee shifting in practice before. But if Congress moves, or if this judge, I guess, puts his money where his mouth is and starts doing this in court, we could see some improvement on that end. And then to top that off, the president put out several executive orders. So instant action, these things are going to happen without any congressional will. One of those things is more experts at the Patent and Trade Office to study the problem of patent trolls. So your tax dollars wasted to answer a question we already know the answer to. But some more actually beneficial executive orders are going to cause the Patent and Trade Office to start lending a lot more support to end users in filing requests for information regarding patents when they get sued by random patent trolls. Also, one of the other big changes is going to be true ownership disclosure. One of the things that patent trolls do is sue on behalf of other companies, where other companies are sort of halfway licensing their patents away to the troll so that they can sue for them. Microsoft does this a lot. There's a lot of other companies that do this a lot, so that way it's not Microsoft versus it's some obscure nobody cares about it versus going after all of this money, but really it's all Microsoft. So this is going to force the actual patent owners to file their name on the applications and to file them every year on their maintenance requests. So people are going to be able to find out who actually owns the material that I'm getting sued over. One of the other really, really important executive orders is restricting functional claims in patents. And what this consists of is better training for the patent and trade officers who issue the patents and certify them. Restricting the functional claims is going to draw down a lot on the ridiculous crap that's getting patented. Functional claims are things like, they're not the actual invention. They're the way to do whatever it is. So looking at the cotton gin, the first patented invention in the country, the cotton gin is a device that was actually patented and is an actual thing. The patent isn't on a method to convert, the organic plant cotton into the refined good of cotton. It wasn't the abstract extracting one substance from another organic substance. But that's the way patents today are written. So it's not just on the cotton gin, it's on the idea of refining cotton. So nobody else who ever invents any other device for refining cotton, and yes, there are more sophisticated and advanced devices nowadays than the cotton gin, but all of those would then be infringing that original patent. This really doesn't happen as badly outside of software. It's really just a problem in software patents. So this is going to play a big role in technology patents. The kind of outstanding question is patents that have already been issued with ridiculous functional claims in them. And in terms of what's going to happen to those, is it's probably going to come down to reviews of those patents, which means still other parties, when they get sued over those ridiculous patents, are going to have to push the Patent and Trade Office to review them before then hopefully they'll start applying stricter standards and actually, not granting patents on things that never ought to have been patentable in the first place. The reason why functional claims don't happen so much outside of software is because they're not allowed outside of software. But people take a functional claim and attach on a computer and then are magically allowed to get a patent on it. So this is really going to put an end to that practice and hopefully clean up a lot of things. And maybe Congress will come through and push through the fee shifting and user protections and really clean things up even more. But this is definitely a huge and good first step.
You know what, Dan? It's good that the government notices these things because, for a while we thought, we were just blindly.
Are you people listening to us?
Hey, now they might be, But we'll talk about that next week. One last question here. So YouTube user ANTTL462 says, "What about Android 5.0 key lime pie?" No. All right, so. You can find us on AndroidAuthority.com, YouTube.com/AndroidAuthority, Facebook, Twitter if you're into podcasts, which, hey, you might be listening to us right now on a podcast. You can check us out on Miro, on Currents, on iTunes, Shudder, I know. And you can also check us out on SoundCloud. We have a big following on SoundCloud. If you're not following us, circling us, liking us, I don't know, fanning us, whatever, on any of these places, feel free to social all the things and click that follow, like, circle button. We'd love to have it. Thanks again for watching. Dan, thanks for your insights. And John, you know what? Your bed is made. We need to get you on here with a made bed more often without Scott. If you didn't notice, Scott wasn't here tonight. He's at a cabin right now. He's on another retreat learning how to make a bed. All right, guys, have a good night. Have a good weekend. Are going to go to the community, and they're going to talk about things they like, things they don't like, things they want to see. They're going to say, hey, good job, thanks, and they're going to actively engage one another. So the beta program is great for us as Android users, but it's also great for Google Plus as a platform to keep pushing Google Plus and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just so much the dog fooding Google Plus, which I'm sure is a goal of Google's in that front, but it's also a value added for developers, right? Like, they're giving developers a free place, free hosted place to channel all of their comments, all of their questions, all of their development, all of their foruming, all of their everything into this free community that we're going to host for you, no charge. Here you go, right? If app developers and ROM developers start taking advantage of that same sort of platform, that's going to be the end of some major Android communities like XDA and RootsWiki and even the Android Central forums, right? If Google pushes this hard enough and right and to the right people, they could really take over the Android forum market too.
Mm-hmm.
I could see that happening in some regard. I know, like Paranoid Android, their official forums, is just pretty much their Google Plus community.
Exactly.
Signage and Mod has a massive Google Plus community. Now they also have their forums too. AOKP has massive forum here. So yeah, I could see that happening a little bit. But back to betas, yeah, it's very neat. It requires Google Plus use of Google Plus and I like it. So once again, if you found any other ones besides the ones I mentioned, Dash Clock Widget, AOKP Backup, Falcon Pro, Slide Out Messaging, Nova Launcher, go ahead and let us know in the comments that your friends get the new Hangout, the new calendar, the new music, new Gmail, and you don't have it. Where the hell is my update? So, yeah, they're bad. They make you wait, but they do have some good to them, Dan. So why are app rollouts good?
Well, they really do have some benefits for developers. People who are hosting these apps on their own servers, not on Google's servers, can't necessarily take the kind of pressure that tons and tons of people trying to download it all at once for an update or a new app launch. So it gives them the ability to stage that and stagger the load on their servers. But when you're Google, load on your servers really ought not be an issue. And if that's really the reason why they're using these staged rollouts, that's kind of embarrassing because they ought to have better servers than that.
So let's say Dan. So Twitter, for example, which they should have better servers too, but that's the first app that came to mind because they had a recent update. So let's say I don't think they did staged updates, but let's say so Twitter's servers don't get hammered with everyone saying, "Wow, I want to see what's new," and going and downloading it and testing out the new features. Yeah, I would understand why a smaller company, maybe Twitter wasn't the best example, but
No, but for independent developers, it's definitely a benefit. Even for mid-level developing companies, for like just app companies, like One Louder apps, for example. Although I think they're a bad example because they have some other larger parent company. But groups that are just app companies, not platforms like Twitter. But they don't have that kind of massive infrastructure for servers because they don't need massive server farms usually. But they can't necessarily handle that kind of load, so it gives them a way to offload it. And
welcome to Android Authority on Air, the original Android Hangout show on Google+. I'm Derek Ross.
And I'm Dan Charlton.
And I'm Jonathan Franklin.
This week we have all sorts of fun stuff to talk about, mainly why app rollouts suck. And over the past few weeks you've probably experienced that. We're also going to talk about a Google Glass update. We're going to talk about the Samsung Galaxy S4 Active, which was officially announced this past week. And then we're going to have a little bit of State of the Union discussion. We're going to talk about the new Nexus program, the Nexus User Experience program, and how a keyboard being released to the Google Play Store is much more significant than an actual keyboard. It's how Android is evolving and how Android is changing. All right, so let's get started. So I said app rollouts suck, and it's an awesome feature, but we'll get to that in a minute. But ever since I/O, Google has been touting one of the latest and greatest features of the Play Store, and that is to do app rollouts. So if you've gotten the music update, calendar, Hangouts, Gmail, yada yada yada, you've seen all your friends on social networks posting, "Hey, I got the new Gmail," and you go and you check, and I don't have it yet. You check 4 hours later, I don't have it yet. The next day, damn it, I still don't have the update. Where is my update? It's available. All your all your friends have it. You're not the cool kid with the update, and you want it. It makes you want it more. It makes you mad. For the past week or two, has been becoming more popular. More and more app developers are starting to take advantage of app betas, the beta program. Some of these are Dash Clock Widget, which I love that. I'm sure a lot of you love it if you're on Android 4.2. AOKP Backup has a beta community. Falcon Pro, the very popular Twitter client, has a beta community. Slide Out Messaging has it. And the really popular Nova Launcher has a beta community. I'm sure there's others. These are just ones that I've found, ones that I'm a member of. And you know what? If you found another beta community for another popular app, go ahead and drop it in the comments and let us know, and we'll add it to our list. All right, so why are these beta communities significant? Well, as John was saying, it allows developers to test new features of an app to get some feedback on it. How does it work? Does it work on XYZ device? Do you like this new feature? What do you want to see? But also, this is actually really significant. It actually pushes Google Plus even more. You see, if you're going to use the beta program as a developer, whenever you upload your new app and you say you want to enter into this beta program, you have to select a Google Plus community, meaning that you have to have, it's a requirement to have a Google Plus community for your app. So that's making developers use Google Plus, and it's making app fans, us, the consumers, use Google Plus, and it's not making you be an active user, because the developer is going to say, "Hey guys, here's my community," and then all the people that are a member of the beta program
over time. But even more than that, it gives you a way to put out your app, have people try it, download it, use it, and maybe come back and say, "Hey, there's some glitch, something you missed," Because let's be realistic, especially for smaller developers, it's easy to miss things. It's easy to overlook something if you aren't going through some rigorous quality control process. And even if you are, it's easy to miss a typo or some weird bug on some weird device. And so it gives you the ability to call it back, stop the rollout, fix whatever the problem is, and then redo it without having tons of users experiencing whatever that problem is. You only have a very small population then.
So it's very developer-centric, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely good for developers. It's not really good for huge companies that ought to be able to take that kind of pressure and those kind of fast rollouts.
I think maybe Google is demonstrating this ability, showing developers that, hey, look, you can do it, and this is how it works. Kind of dog fooding, eating your own dog food, per se. John, you had a comment? John, did you have a comment?
It just, if you release something like that, in terms of not just getting it to the users, but affecting your overall reviews on the Play Store, because, most of the reviews are, oh, this update broke my whatever, fix it. You're talking about, because developers really look at their average on the reviews and wonder where they're at. So that's one big thing, is that anything that's released, that's the reason the beta program doesn't affect, reviewers can't post on beta just because of the same reasoning. So.
Okay, and speaking of app beta programs, let's talk about that. That's a new feature that, once again, launched at I/O, and